The decline and fall of the American empire is due probably more than any other cause to the really corrupting influence of the commercial control, domination of radio and television in this country.
Good afternoon, WKGN.
Taking you back, 1967, Diana Ross.
Some smoke and haze being reported throughout the area.
City officials were unable to reach a decision.
38 civilians are reported dead or wounded.
Going to be sunny today and tomorrow. High today 90. Mean temperature 85.
Say, nobody makes really great bread like Kern's Bakery does. Real down-home, honest-to-goodness bread like the folks at Kern's do. And you know, that's just what makes Kern's so popular with bread with great bread flavor.
WEAM, more music now.
Today, this radio station is worth $6.5 million, and we have rejected several cash offers of that amount. Maybe it's worth more now.
During the civil disorders of 1967 and 1968, we had almost literally the phenomenon of these modern-day electronic Neros sitting there playing recorded fiddle music while their own rooms burned around them.
You can win $1,340 in WKGN's Great Smoky Mountain Dingbat Contest.
Folks, today, when our faith is the one thing we can really depend upon, the Longines Symphonette Society has created the most moving and inspiring collection of gospel songs ever put together.
Sweet hour of prayer.
Well, this is the time of the day for a lot of you when suddenly you reach into that closet and you begin to think, gee, what am I going to wear?
Well, it's easy to laugh at American radio. Many people do, including, of course, many, many Americans. But first and last, it's a business, a profitable one and a very large one. There are 6,200 radio stations in the States, just radio stations. And the industry aren't slow to give you figures to show how important it all is. For example, they say that the average American family has at least 4 radio sets. The average adult listens for 3.5 hours each day. Peak listening is before breakfast. The most popular item is news, and then there's music, endless music. I think the thing I enjoyed most were the disc jockeys. Very lively, much, well, livelier than our lot here, I think. And the whole atmosphere in the studios was informal, very professional, but free and easy.
And one news store right in the middle of the other two at 837 South Westmore Road in the Eastgate Shopping Center in Lombard. Pants aplenty. That's where the Levi's are. That's where we hope you'll be as well.
In the larger studios, the DJ works with an engineer. They're a team, very efficient.
The interesting story, a fellow by the name of Booker T. Lee, who happens to be one of 34 children himself, he and his wife happened to become parents this week of their 18th child. Can you imagine? But Mr. Lee, a construction worker who makes $100 a week, says the last birth has been enough. He says the Lord's been good to us, but enough is enough. The couple's house has only 4 bedrooms. And to top it all off, we understand that Mrs. Lee has run out of names to call Mr. Lee.
Well, fine. But, you know, traveling up one of those endless motorways, pressing the buttons on the car radio, it gets tedious. The same 30 tunes, different jockeys, different stations as you go up the road, of course, but no real choice. I suppose I'm prejudiced. I'm an old radio man, and I hate radio being used as a tap. I say this. Here's the finest means of communication since the printing press. It's people talking to people. And all we seem to be able to do with it is to pump out a load of old chat. Surely we've got other things to say to our friends apart from hello, here's the news, Here's some music.
You know, we have this expression in the computer industry, garbage in, garbage out. You can't get anything better out of a computer than what you put into it. Well, I would suggest the same thing is true of people. You can't get anything better out of people than what you put into them either. And we're not putting very good stuff into the American people these days, and I think we're seeing some of the results on the streets.
Nicholas Johnson has been called America's most unafraid public servant. He was appointed by President Johnson. He's one of the 7 men who run the Federal Communications Commission. This commission controls all communications by broadcast and cable in the country. Television, radio, underwater cables, satellites, telephones, the lot. So Nick Johnson, at 36, is an important man, but there are 6 other members on the commission.
The FCC is what we call an independent regulatory commission. You see, we like to retain the pretense of free private enterprise competition, and so instead of nationalizing things, we regulate them, or at least we pretend that we do. In point of fact, the agency ends up largely just serving the needs and desires of the industry.
Commissioner, you grant 6,000 licenses and so on. How do you monitor them? How do you manage to find out, reassure yourself that they are behaving themselves?
Well, I think that's a very important question, because it's essential to explain that we in fact don't do any monitoring. The FCC responds really only to complaints for all practical purposes.
Very near to Nick Johnson's office in Washington, but many miles away in attitude, is the Trade Association of the Industry, the National Association of Broadcasting.
We look for truth. We look for integrity. The basic idea is that this industry will regulate itself rather than have our government regulate us. Now, if we're going to regulate ourselves, we're going to have to behave ourselves.
I think in this industry, the broadcaster is as irresponsible, as greedy as he dares to be, and the FCC will permit him to virtually any bounds. So there's no pressure from government to do a better job, you see.
It's the station's own decision to say that I want to be a good businessman, I want to be a credit to my community, I want to contribute to the welfare of my audience.
Most of the stations are owned by multiple owners, by conglomerate corporations. We've been no more effective in doing what Congress intended for us to do, in holding ownership to local communities, than we have been effective in regulating programming.
So the FCC isn't doing the job?
Well, no, I don't think it is at all. I mean, broadcasters come in here. One fellow said he was going to have 33 minutes of commercials every hour. And the FCC majority found that would be serving the public interest. And another fellow came in and said he was going to have no news, no public affairs whatsoever. And they found that would be serving the public interest. Another extraordinary case, a fellow, normally we grant 3-year licenses, you see.
Yep.
And this licensee had received a probationary license term of 1 year because he'd been found guilty of rigging contests, which one would think would be grounds for losing the license. In any event, he got a 1-year license renewal for rigging contests. While he's on probation, he's found to have bilked advertisers of $6,000 through fraudulent practices that involved taking money from them for commercials he didn't run and so forth. See, $6,000 worth of fraud, protest by the Better Business Bureau in his community, and the FCC renews his license, finds he's been serving the public interest.
I like him very much. He speaks the truth as he sees it.
Studs Terkel is a well-known writer and broadcaster. He has an hour's program every day on the Talks and Classical Music Station in Chicago, WFMT, one of the best in the country. Studs is a bit more optimistic than the commissioner. He feels that while America goes on producing batches of people like Johnson, there's reasonable grounds for hope.
It's very funny, when I was interviewing this man, Nicholas Johnson, on my radio program, I was so overwhelmed by him, I was so impressed by his courage and outspokenness, and being such a humanist, too. At the end, I said to him, because remember, he's a political creature as well as a humanist. I says, by the way, Commissioner, you are over 35, aren't you? He says, yes, I am. I says, and that would make you eligible to be candidate for President of the United States, wouldn't it? He says, yes, it would. So I do have hope. I've got to say that. I do. I must.
Take hairspray, for example. You know, what is a hairspray commercial saying to a woman? You know, a hairspray commercial is saying, well, first of all, it's saying that our hairspray is better than any other hairspray, which I think is demonstrably false. I mean, by and large, it's the same old lacquer. There's an implied premise, I suppose, that the hairspray is not going to be damaging to your hair. I can't really believe that. Then there's the suggestion that if you use the hairspray, you will become sexy. Well, now that involves a whole lot of problems, you see, because there's some question as to whether or not that is the most appropriate goal for women to hold out for themselves.
And I think our broadcasting system, being a free enterprise broadcasting system, has proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that commercial broadcasting is a viable and, more importantly, a tremendous contribution to the welfare of our people.
Basically, what all these product commercials are selling, in addition to the product itself, is the use of chemicals generally. We start off the day with the caffeine in our coffee. We then go to the nicotine in our cigarettes. We then go to the alcohol in our 3-martini lunch. We then take the stomach settler. By the end of the day, we need the pet pill. We get home at night and take the drinks before dinner. We then take the Compose tablet to calm down the tension brought about by our children, and the sleeping pill before we go to bed, unless the woman wishes to take the birth control pill and stay up a while. And basically what they're advertising, to borrow DuPont's expression, is better living through chemistry, you see. And so along comes the old dope peddler and says, hey, kids, I got a better chemical than Mom and Dad. And he's right, you see. And so the Madison Avenue executives in their public service time sit down over their 3-martini lunch and try to devise an advertising campaign that will convince children that they should buy and consume 16 chemicals but not the 17th. And it just won't work. You cannot tell people that the solution to the very complex problems of living, of interpersonal relationships, of developing the skills one needs to cope with the modern society, that all these can be solved by the popping of a pill.
Well, I can't disagree, but I do sometimes wonder whether we don't make too much of a bogey of advertising. After all, here's mankind after countless thousands of years of every sort of horror, including many attempts at brainwashing, and we've sort of survived. And now there's this fear that we're going to be put down at long last by some clever fellows in Madison Avenue. I don't know. It could happen, I suppose. I do wonder whether the American radio people worry as much about this as we do. Most of the men I met weren't all that concerned about the final result. They were so wrapped up, so believing in the ordinary day-to-day routine of their job.
We don't hire a man who is a star at any other station, any other market. We won't touch this man for obvious reasons, because we have to undo all that has been done before. We take a man and we want two things. We want attitude. We must have it. He must want to come to this radio station with a passion that almost defies description.
It takes an imaginative mind to be in this business.
It's the voice talking to the individual.
His patter has to be geared to that particular record.
To make them want to listen to us all the time.
So now, here is your good friend and mine.
Call 525-1750 right now to volunteer your help.
Do people really listen to radio these days? Listen.
I think people really listen.
Well, no, because there's nothing to listen to. There's nothing but noise, basically.
WKGN, feeling groovy.
$1,340 can be your second prize, $134.
WKGN, feeling groovy.
It seems logical to automate this kind of broadcasting, and it's been done. This machine delivers 24 hours of music and commercials, all dished up at precisely the right moment.
The name of the brand is the name of the game. You really should play at Weebles.
But not all owners are happy about automation.
I inherited this radio station when it was totally automated. I had 2 announcers. One man worked part-time at the Pentagon during the day and came in at night, and he worked till 3 o'clock in the morning, automated, building this sound. I had another man, bear in mind an announcer, if you will, who did announcing, he did traffic, and to fill in, did a little selling, too, when there's spare time. 2 men, if you will, running it. And that's fine, theoretically. But there is a thing you cannot capture. There's a thing you can't reach. A man can do a commercial on tape or on card, as we say, and do a tremendous job. But to try to convince that man that he can record tomorrow's program and be as spontaneous and be as creative as he wants to be just hasn't been brought out yet.
WCFL, Chicago.
What sort of money does a top DJ earn?
Well, here in the Chicago area, in New York, Chicago, and San Francisco are just about on a par. You can estimate anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000 a year.
Golly.
Somewhere in that area. But his life expectancy is not that great. And therein lies the crux of the problem, because that man may be on top for, some of us have been on top for a little longer, but on the average 4, 5, 6 years. So while he is propelled in that high income bracket for a short period of time, and he's busier than a one-legged cat in a sandbox while he's going at it, then suddenly he's gone.
A short life, perhaps, but a very profitable one. And the owners and advertisers I met seemed content, too. There was no doubt in their minds that radio paid.
We were doing about $70,000 with 4 stores. We put on a 30-minute radio show in the morning and one at noon, and we raised this to about $200,000 a month. So I'd have to say it's good.
One of the areas in which I think you do tend to get at least effective local service, even if it's not what you and I would think of as high-quality programming, in the very small towns.
Here we have some cats to give away, so if anyone needs a cat today, you can call 823-4345, and they're yours for the asking. They're absolutely free.
Recently on vacation in the mountain country of West Virginia. It's where I found out about when the Valley softball championship was to be played, you see, so my boys and I could go watch that.
Yes,
and they played country and western music, and they had commercials, but because it was a small area, they didn't have so many national commercials. And so the commercials were mostly of some interest and relevance. They told me where the lumber yard was, where I could go to buy the lumber to build the outhouse we were building for the person whose land it was, and told me about the specials at the grocery store and so forth, and this was all at least potentially relevant and useful information. They weren't trying to generate needs in me that didn't already exist. They were trying to tell me where I could go satisfy those I already had.
I know that God reached down and touched my hand and touched my heart because I'm alive forevermore. And there's nothing that the doctors could do, but God done it all. The great physician from the portals of glory came in, and he healed my body, and he set my feet upon the solid rock, which is Christ Jesus.
A child was born to save us from our sins. John saw him on the shore, the Lamb forevermore. He was the Christ, the man of Galilee. Oh, I love that man of Galilee. Who hath done...
You can buy program time if the station agrees to sell. This gospel group paid $10 for half an hour. But supposing the message you wanted to put over was less conventional. Suppose you were against the war in Vietnam.
Well, recently this has arisen in a number of decisions here at the FCC. There were a group of businessmen who felt that war was bad for business as well as for young soldiers, who wanted to put announcements to that effect on a local television station. And they came to them, and in the great traditions of American enterprise, offered to pay for the time. You see, they said, we'll pay you whatever your commercial rates are. We would just like to get this message out. And the station refused. They said, no, we will not accept your money, we will not accept your message. And the businessmen came to the FCC and said, we believe that we are entitled to access. The FCC rejected that appeal by the businessmen. I wrote a rather lengthy dissenting opinion, which I believe virtually demolishes the majority's lack of reasoning. But what will happen to that depends on whether the businessmen want to appeal and what a court ultimately does with it.
They didn't tell us that this government, from its very inception, was never a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, that from jump...
Of course, you could apply to the FCC for a license to start a news station. But there really aren't any frequencies left in the well-populated areas, so that wouldn't work. So the only other thing you might do would be to buy or acquire an existing studio.
WBAI is supported entirely by your contributions. In that way, we're able to remain free to broadcast what you want to hear and what's not heard on other radio stations in New York City.
I couldn't work for an organization that didn't allow you to throw your cigarettes on the floor. You trade away the perquisites of a staff, and you trade away a nice office, and you trade away memo pads, and you trade away organization, and you get absolute freedom. If I go out to do a program, I can do what I want to do. We every now and then get a phone call, and somebody calls up and says, "What is this, Radio Hanoi?" I'm 20 years old, and I've been working here for 3 years. First of all, CBS, NBC, nobody's going to give me a chance at 17 to do the kind of things I was doing here when I was 17. Broadcasting in America should provide something for the people, should not be a commercially exploited thing.
It's time to get down to the insurance company and shuffle those papers, and tote those barges and lift those bales. It's time to get down and make the economy move. It's time to get down and sell out.
The broadcasters enjoy it. There are 23,000 subscribers. The running cost is $500,000 a year. There are 4 such stations in the country. It's a drop in the ocean of conformity.
Don't complain. You're paid well, and you get your quantum of air and space and your 3 minutes to have lunch. Have a nice day.
Award-winning WLIV Radio is now proud and privileged to present another program in that distinguished series, Rally Round the Flag, which on this nation's birthday pays honor and tribute to you, our fellow Americans, and to the American way of life.
What about the political views of people applying for a license?
Well, the politics of the applicants are something that should be of no concern to us. They're obliged to comply with the fairness doctrine, you see. But aside from that, their politics are none of our business, or should be none of our business. During the 1950s here at the FCC, the charge was made and followed up by congressional inquiry that the FCC was essentially being run out of the White House, and that the White House was making decisions to give television stations to those newspapers who had supported Eisenhower. It was perhaps the low point in the history of an agency that has had very few high points.
There's no doubt. Radio is a powerful political weapon, if you can afford to buy enough time.
I've been mayor 3 times. I've been on city council. I've been vice mayor 5 times. I've been head of everything about our city in the way of a chairman. And I did it on radio and television, and I did it sometimes in spite of the 2 newspapers of fighting me.
The broadcasters have now reached the point where they have such extraordinary political power that there's virtually no force that can restrain them, you see. They are more powerful than the President of the United States. They are more powerful than the Congress. Virtually every congressman and senator must look to his local broadcasters to help him get elected. With their opposition, surely he would be defeated in most instances, in many instances. With their support, he will, in most instances, be reelected. He simply cannot afford to engage their vigorous antagonism. The FCC, Federal Communications Commission, is subject to the pressures not only through Congress from the broadcasting industry, but also directly pressures from the broadcasting industry on the Commission. And I don't know who there is left in our country to do battle with these fellows. Whenever the issues are publicly drawn, those who wish to come out in the open and speak seem to be very few and far between. The question is, what do you put into that communication system? Are you passing on the culture? Are you using it for socially useful purposes? Or are you simply using it for the sale of products? I have this horrible image of the last day in America, you see, when the bombs finally start to fall, and the broadcaster scurrying across the studio floor, trying to get that last commercial on the air and into the accounts receivable books. into the last run of I Love Lucy before his tower finally melts and falls to the ground.
Britain going into local commercial radio is an excellent idea.
I don't see how Britain has done without it.
I think it's tremendous.
Because how else do people in the marketplace hear about things for sale that they need?
I think you're going to be able to hire better people. You're going to get better product.
I think Britain is extremely wise to become involved in commercial radio.